Biggest round of applause all day.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you, Pastor.
Oh, you were so gracious. I called him the other day. You know what I love about Coach? He's not only a great coach, great commentator, Hall of Fame legend, but I would see him at the school where our children attended in the pickup car line. That's pretty awesome. So good to have you today.
I just left the drop-off car.
Those drop-off coordinators, they're ruthless, aren't they?
Yes, they are. But other place you don't always see me. I love your Halloween alternative. We bring our kids every year, and it's been awesome just to come out and hang out and have fun in a safe Christian environment on October 31st.
It's always so good to have you guys. And so thank you. I just called him last week. We had this spot, and I said, Coach, we've got a great group of team leaders, coaches, pastors, and staff members that are coming from all over the country. Would you come by and share? And in a moment, he was so gracious to accept this invitation. You know, Coach, you are just, I think, a legend and just a Hall of Fame coach. But, you know, one of the things that I admire about you, you're a Hall of Fame dad, you're a Hall of Fame husband, and a Hall of Fame father. You've got people that balance a lot of priorities. And I want to share today just some things maybe that you, as your journey has possessed, walking through a, life, having a lot of things to juggle. What are just some things that you could say to these leaders today that you've learned along the way?
Well, I think the first thing I learned, and we were talking about it backstage a little bit, my first boss with the Pittsburgh Steelers was a guy named Chuck Noll, who was a tremendous coach. He taught me a lot. I got there in the middle of an excellent run. They had won 2 Super Bowls when I got there as a 21-year-old rookie. And I'm sitting in the first row of the first meeting that we had with my notebook open, ready to write everything this man says, because he's going to tell me how to win a Super Bowl. And the first thing he said to us when we got there, he said, welcome to the National Football League. You're now getting paid to play football, so that makes it your profession. But don't make football your whole life. Please don't make football your whole life. If you do that, you're going to be disappointed when you leave. And he went on and talked for 15 minutes about getting involved in the community, about balancing life, about keeping and getting fulfillment from something outside of your job. And I'm writing this down and saying, this man is crazy. What about Super Bowls? How are we going to win Super Bowls? How are we going to be the best we can be? That wasn't his MO at all. And he had one son. He had him around the locker room all the time. His wife went on every road trip with us. He did so many things in the community and set the stage. And that had an impact on me as a 21-year-old kid. So I remember coming here to Tampa when I got the Bucs job in 1996, and that was my first speech to the team. Hey, here's what we're going to do. We want to win a Super Bowl, but we're going to do it the right way. You guys are going to be great role models. We're going to do this off the field. Don't make football your whole life. And I had a 45-minute talk about how we're going to do it without ever mentioning winning. And I'll never forget, after the meeting, Derek Brooks, who was a great player for us, he came in to my office afterwards and said, Coach, we lost more games last year than I lost in my whole life. What about winning? And I said, hey, I had the same thought, Derek, 25 years ago, but here's how we're going to do it. And he's gone on to become one of the great men in this city. And he took it and understood that, hey, we've got to honor the Lord first, and the winning will take care of itself.
It's so good. You know, I heard you so many times, and so much of your message is so much more about developing football players, but developing men and leaders and husbands and people that are productive in the community. Derek Brooks, great example, just one of the faces now in our city that represents in so many ways. You know, I look at your journey, and I watched as you won the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning. Did an amazing job. Really set John Gruden up, and he came in behind you, but really the foundation was already here. But the way you've led and the way you do lead, and the coaches that were around you, like Lovie Smith, Jim Caldwell, we were just talking about some of these guys, you had such a composure in the way you led, and you led with such to me, a calm confidence, and how you engage with the players.
And it wasn't always that way. My high school buddies, when people described me as calm and under control, I was not like that in high school. My mom and dad always talked to me about composure and keeping your cool and honoring God, and it was hard for me. But as I grew as a Christian, that helped, and then I began to understand that when you make decisions, you have to think about it. You have to be under control. And my dad would always say, when something bad happens, you have to think about what you can do to make the situation better. And I remember telling him, well, I don't want to think about that right now. I just want to vent. I want to be mad for a minute. Anyway, can I just be mad? He said, no, what are you going to do going forward? How are you going to make it better? So that became kind of my thought process and my MO. And I always felt you make better decisions if you're calm and you're under control and you think about things rather than just react. So that's what I tried to do. And some people, especially in our profession, they didn't see that as being a plus. He's too this, he's too that, he's too Christian, he's not going to be mean enough, he's not going to be tough enough. I remember I had one job interview with an owner of a team, and he asked me point blank, he said, I've done a lot of research on you, and I know that you don't raise your voice very much. They say you don't use profanity at all. I said, no, I try not to. How in the world are you going to manage these high testosterone guys we have? How are you going to get them to do what we need done? And I said, well, I think I'll do it just like my dad did. My dad, first of all, showed me that he loved me and he cared about me. And he eventually showed me that he had my best interest. And I had a deep respect for him, and I loved him, and I didn't want to disappoint him. And that's what I'm going to do with my players. And this guy looked at me and he said, that won't work in the NFL. And he didn't hire me. And so
I'm sure he was sorry.
Well, he did tell me a few years later, yeah, I didn't think it would work, but I see it kind of did. That was another thing I learned from Coach Noel. Coach Noel encouraged, he said, be yourself. You have to be who you are. And I heard Tony Evans, actually, we were talking about chapel services, and you've given a lot of chapel services to teams. Well, Tony Evans gave us a chapel service one time when I was a young player, and I'll never forget it. He said, we're talking about be who you are. He said, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian pastor. But guess what? When I go home, I'm a Christian husband. And I'm a Christian father. And when I go across the street to talk to my neighbor, I'm a Christian neighbor. I'm a Christian everything. And I started thinking about that and saying, man, that's got to be me. I got to be a Christian player. And then when I got finished with that and I started coaching, I said, I got to be a Christian coach. And now I'm a Christian broadcaster. But whatever I do, Christ has to be first.
Yes.
That's how I try to do it.
We have such innovators in this room, and so many guys that I can name, and you were such a barrier breaker, not only in your accomplishment, but who you raised up. And to talk about some of the pressures about stepping out on the edge of where people had never been, being the first African-American coach to win the Super Bowl, but one of really the first influential people of influence in that world.
Yeah, I came into the National Football League in 1977. There were no African-American general managers, there were no African-American head coaches, there were only 10 assistant coaches, African-American assistant coaches in the entire league. At that time there were 28 teams, so 18 teams didn't have any, and 10 teams had one on the staff. And I remember when I got my job thinking, gosh, how did this happen? And God has put me here for a reason. So as I started climbing the ladder, how am I going to use that? Well, number one, I'm going to help some other minority coaches, but number two, I also want to represent the Lord. So I want to make sure people know not only am I African American, and I'm proud of that, but I'm also going to do it God's way, and I'm proud of that as well. So I got here to Tampa, and I had a chance to hire my first staff and pick the guys that I wanted. And I'll never forget, I was very, very intentional. I said, I'm going to get some young guys and give them an opportunity, and I'm going to get some minority coaches to develop. And I remember when I started bringing my first group in, and it was guys people hadn't heard of. And it was Lovie Smith and Herm Edwards and Mike Tomlin. And people were saying, where do these guys come from? What do they do? Who are they? Who is Lovie Smith? just relax, you'll see. It's going to be pretty good. And it turned out that they were, but giving those guys an opportunity, letting them grow is something I'm very proud of. And to have 5 guys that work for me, 6 guys go on to be head coaches, and Lovey and Mike taking teams to the Super Bowl. It was awesome. I'm very, very proud of it.
Now, you pouring into these guys, I will say this, you must not have taught Lovey Smith everything, because you beat him in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I can give him all the secrets.
Don't teach him everything.
But one thing I am proud of, and my dad always used to say that, is when you want to leave things better than they were, and you want to give people an opportunity to be able to function without you. And I never wanted to set it up where, if something happens to me, it's all going to fall apart. So I left the Bucs in 2001. In 2002, they won the Super Bowl. I left the Colts in 2008. In 2009, they went to the Super Bowl with Jim Caldwell. So feeling like I gave people an opportunity, and I left it a little better than when I found it.
It's so good. Coach, I watched as you walked away from coaching. You're still involved in the NFL with broadcasting, a little bit different role. But you walked away, I'm sure, being sought after, probably still by many owners. You had just won the Super Bowl a few years before you left, and Indianapolis had so many great pieces. Again, Jim Caldwell took them to the Super Bowl just a couple of years later. But I watched as you transitioned, got involved with All Pro Dads and the other organizations we've been a part of. And I've watched as you guys have adopted children, something that's dear to our heart. Talk a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, you always wonder what the Lord has in store for you and what He's doing with you. And my wife Lauren is just kind of the rock of the family. But she was always kind of looking, how can we have an impact? And she organized the wives, and they were reading to elementary kids and doing different projects in the city. And she talked about adoption early on, 20 years ago. We adopted a little boy, and the agency we worked with, it was a Christian agency that actually worked with crisis pregnancy centers, encouraged women not to have abortions, and then promised them, if you carry this baby to term, we'll find a Christian home for him or her. And she told us she was having trouble because they didn't have enough adoptive parents, and specifically minority parents. And that kind of hurt us, because we claimed to be pro-life and all that. And so we said, you mean to tell me that some of these women, they're making the choice to be pro-life, and then there's nowhere to place these children? And she said, that's exactly what I'm telling you. So my wife wouldn't let that rest, and we adopted a little boy 20 years ago who just turned 20 now. And then the next year we adopted another one, and 2 years later, now we have 8. Our youngest daughter, son is 20, and our youngest daughter's 5, and we have 6 in between them. So.
That's awesome. We were talking a little bit about this last season we walked through, and how kingdom principles lead us. And one of the things that I've been so blessed and encouraged by you, you're in this media world, you have just an amazing platform. But in this last political season, not to talk about any party, but I saw you make statements about people that did not align with the right to life, and maybe it wasn't in, and I know you probably got a lot of backlash with that. I won't say who the politician was, but I saw you come out, and it encouraged me so much to see the stance you take, the platform you have.
Yeah, I'm on social media. NBC, encouraged me to get on there, and I wasn't going to do it. But then a friend of mine said, no, you can use social media to promote the Lord. So I said, okay, NBC wants me to do that, I'll do it, but people are going to get some gospel too.
Yeah.
So right after the George Floyd thing this summer, I was so mad, and I was going to write something that really wasn't the right thing to do. I was upset, and I said, hey, here's what's going on, and we need changes, we need different leadership, and I wrote this all out, and my finger was that far from sin, and something, my dad's voice came back to me and said, is this really going to make things better? It might be true, but is it going to make things better? And I thought about that, and I didn't push sin. And I stopped and I rewrote it. And I said, you know what, our country is facing a lot of issues and we've got a lot of problems. What we really need is the church to come forward and be the leaders.
Yes.
And we need to do what the Apostle Paul said, don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So I rewrote that and I pushed send, and I think 8 million people saw that text. And responded, and so many, and I got opportunities on sports shows to say, what is this about overcoming evil with good? And explain this to us. And, it was just unbelievable how the Lord used it, but that let me know, hey, we got to honor the Lord always. So I was going back and forth with this lady on Twitter, and she was saying that you could be pro-choice, and she knew some pastors who were pro-choice. And so I said, well, I don't know a Christian pastor that's pro-choice. Maybe he's a pastor, but maybe he's not a Christian. So she writes back and tells me who the guy is, and this is his belief. And personally, he's not pro-choice, but really he's pro-choice. And I said something, well, I just don't believe that, and I don't see how you could read Psalm 139, and if you're a pastor, you certainly would have read Psalm 139, and how you could be pro-choice reading that. And so then she writes back and tells me who the guy is. It turns out he was running for senator in Georgia. I didn't even know it. Well, I get all this pushback now. Here you are attacking the black man that's trying to be, and I said, I'm not attacking black, white, and I'm attacking a pastor who says it's okay to kill babies. And I don't know who he is. I just don't think that this is the right thing to do. So I try to speak the truth in love, but it gave me an opportunity to just share what God's truth is.
I've always respected you. When I read that, my respect for you went to another level. And Coach, I know you've got around, you've got a lot of things, and these are high octane leaders. They're all leading at a high level, and so encouraged to hear what you guys do in Minnesota with your, challenging men to live an uncommon life, challenging people to be leaders. What is just one principle you could leave with these leaders today, and maybe one thing you could say as they journey into the next season?
I think probably the best thing I could say is we all know the truth in here that my mom's favorite verse in the Bible is Matthew 16:26. What would it profit a man to gain the whole world but forfeit his soul? So many people out in our world need to hear that. And if you can just keep getting that message out in the right way, in love, you'll help so many people. Keep sharing the gospel. Keep standing up for Christ. We need it today more than ever.